Welcome back. This is Out in the Wild. I am Jess, and I am really excited to be chatting with my old friend, Jamie Stein. He is on from LA in the thick of, we're both in a lockdown. I'm in New York. You're in a lockdown. Are you in West Hollywood, Jamie?
No, I live in Miracle Mile.
Oh, Miracle Mile. I'm on with Jamie Stein. He's an empath and an intuitive. And can you explain to the audience how you work with individuals in their personal lives and in their professional lives? You describe it almost as if you help people excavate these small hidden parts of themselves that are like lurking beneath the surface, and you help release those.
Yeah, totally. So basically the idea is that if we're manifesting our realities and co-creating everything that shows up in our lives, clearly there are things happening in our lives that we don't like, or we feel stuck around, or we feel blocked around. So maybe you're someone who really wants a relationship, but you're never getting a relationship, or you're not getting a relationship you like. Maybe you feel creatively blocked. These are things that your conscious mind is saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. But if it's not actually flowing in your life, then some unconscious part of you must be saying no to that, if you believe that we manifest our realities, which I personally do. So what I'm able to do as an intuitive, as an empath, I'm able to go into the client's unconscious landscape and basically start shedding light on the parts of them that are saying no to the things they actually want and why. And then we start to explore where that comes from. And so what's cool about it is that you then start to get information about what is it inside you that really needs to heal around this in order to actually create the things that you want in your life. So in that way, it's not so much more about like, oh, something's wrong with me or the universe is punishing me. And it instead becomes an opportunity for you to really look at yourself, heal, grow, change, and become the person who then, manifests that very thing that you want in the first place. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. We first met, maybe a year and a half ago, because I reached out to Jamie. I had found Jamie. I randomly found a video that you had made on YouTube where you were psychoanalyzing Bethany and Carol. And I was so into your analysis of the two of them. And then I think I stumbled upon another video you did of Erica Jane. And I was just like, I have to have a reading with this guy. Like, I thought you were unbelievably dynamic in these videos. And so I went to your website, we set up a Skype call, and you and I like literally did a reading for me. I remember I was in kind of like a creative lull in my life, and I didn't quite know what the next step was going to be. And then it was literally maybe like 6 months later, 7 months later, that I actually started this podcast, which has been like a huge creative explosion in my life. And I don't know, maybe there was a coincidence, who knows what it was, but that I always think of you like in doing this podcast and just my life in general. Like, I remember, I'll never forget that reading that we did together.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I love hearing that because, honestly, and I always tell people at the end of sessions, like, please know you can keep in touch with me because I love hearing about this stuff because, I will be in contact with people, sometimes days, weeks, or even like months later, and they will share with me, like, after that session, like, this happened, that happened, this changed, that changed. And to me, it's just like, I mean, this is literally why I'm doing this work. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want to do it if it weren't actually going to have an impact. And I love hearing things like that because it is ultimately just all about our energy and, the willingness to bring it to the light of consciousness and to accept it and to change your relationship to it. And once your energy just has permission to flow more, then it is true. Like, the universe can meet you there, and things really do happen for people on an external level that always kind of really delights me. And it's been great also, I've seen you from afar because I think we follow each other on social media, and, I've seen what's been going on with the podcast, and it's felt very powerful and alive. So, I love that this is, all unfolded.
So while you are, you are an empath and an intuitive, you're obviously a very talented guy. You are also a huge Bravo fan. And you are able to watch these characters, watch these people on TV, and you're actually able to channel them and kind of like dig into their unconscious mind. And that is what I watched you do with Bethany and Carol. And it's almost like these fights that we see little bits and pieces of that they're cutting together on the show. It's almost like you're able to unearth like a 40-minute expose on like the actual on like the actual reasons that people, like the real things that are going on behind the scenes. And that's what I want to do with you today in this episode. Are you up on Vanderpump?
Yes.
So we're in the midst, this has been like a season long. Well, it's been two seasons long that we've been deep in the thick of Jax and Brittany's wedding. And so I would love to talk about how you feel about Jax and Brittany, like their dynamic, and maybe some things that, some unconscious things that are being said between them, as well as Jax and Tom Sandoval's friendship and the unconscious things that aren't being said between the two of them. I think of that scene where they're sitting there in the Sir Dump alley, and their chairs are facing forward. They're not even looking at each other. And I'd love to like see if you can tap into that. And then maybe from there we can go to like Tom and Ariana, because I would love to like hear just your take on their relationship, because it is so different from these other heterosexual relationships that we see on the show.
Yeah, sure. So do you want to start with Jax and Brittany?
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're an interesting couple because I actually think deep down energetically they are a right match for each other. Like if they were to both go and do their own separate work on themselves and then come back, like I think that they would be a good fit. But I think sort of currently my feeling off them is that, they're really using one another to get what they want. I think that Brittany is someone who clearly wants a certain kind of wedding. She wants it in the castle. She's wanted it since she was a young girl. She wants to sort of have the fairy princess life. And I think that, for me, I've said this for a while, like it's been clear to me that I think she absolutely wanted the notoriety of the show. I think somehow, this is my thing about Brittany. I've never trusted her from the beginning. And I've always felt like this is a woman who knows how to get what she wants. And to me, it's like, not like someone twirling their mustache, like let me be manipulative and let me like scheme and plot. That doesn't feel like her kind of savvy. But to me, she's always felt like, how like a kid can know how to get what they want. Like they can be cute in just the right way and they know how to say the right thing to get what they want. Or like a dog can be that way too. There can be kind of this like almost childlike manipulation. And what I hear from Brittany is just, I want what I want, what I want. And I think she's someone who knows how to get what she wants. And I think it's interesting, this whole relationship to kind of being the little girl, like the princess. Like she strikes me as someone who for a very long time has known how to play a certain role as this kind of cute little girl who sort of lives in this fantasy land. And underneath that, though, she knows how to get what she wants. And there's actually kind of a real power there. Because my whole thing with her is like, if you take away her personality and if you take away kind of her, shucks, I'm just a simple Southern girl, and you look at like the reality of how she entered the show, which was basically like she met Jax right away, moved from Kentucky, moved into his little studio apartment while they're filming the show, immediately gets a job at Sir. He pays for her new breast implants, which, more power to them. But it's like, if this were anyone else, I feel like if she presented a different kind of way or looked a different kind of way, people would just be like, basically she wanted to get on the show, but because she has this way of maneuvering, I think that, she kind of got away with it. People believe this sort of facade that she's cultivated. And so I think absolutely, like Jax is sort of giving her everything that she wants. And then I think for Jax, oh my God, I mean, we've seen it. Jax kind of flutters back and forth between being the asshole who basically, he, like Brittany, wants to do whatever he wants to do. And he does it. And then he gets blamed and punished for it. And so then quite compulsively, almost like an addict, I'd say, Jax will turn over a new leaf. You know, and I think what we've seen here, I think that Jax has been in a really long chapter of turning over a new leaf. Like, he's gone from transition to transition to transition, meaning his dad died. So then that brought him back together with Brittany. So then suddenly he was revering Brittany. Then suddenly he was proposing to Brittany. Now they're getting married. And the whole thing of like, Jax got it right. Mm-hmm. We're in this narrative now of like, oh, Jax, you're finally doing it. You're a good guy. And because everyone believes that Brittany is this like special little fairy princess, it feeds Jax's narrative that he's now getting it right, right? So they're kind of like using each other for each other's narratives, and they're both kind of getting what they quote unquote want on like this sort of deeper level that I don't think is healthy for either one of them. But I think that they both also kind of feel entitled underneath all that as well.
You know, she swears that she did not know who he was when they met by fate, quote unquote, in Vegas that night.
I mean, I've heard differently from people who work on the show. I've heard, this is not stuff I've seen with my own eyes, but I've heard something like at some point she actually had photos on social media of her outside SUR before she ever met Jax. I heard that she knew they were going to be there in Vegas and somehow like facilitated the encounter. This is secondhand information. It is information I heard from people who work on the show. So that is what I've heard through the grapevine.
Wow.
Which to me, that kind of makes me happy. Like when I feel into that, I'm like, okay, you go, Brittany. Like, I'm like, I support her. You know, she knows how to get what she wants. You know, she's powerful.
But also, if that's true, that deepens your belief. It strengthens your entire argument. Do you think you'd be able to drop into Jax? Because I'm curious. I remember there was one time online you were talking about how he feels that Brittany ought to thank him.
Yeah. So, I can elaborate on that. And then I can go in and see if there's anything new coming in. But yeah, no, I definitely feel Jax feels that Brittany owes him. Like, I think, like, if I feel into it, it's kind of like, I've given you this life. I plucked you from Kentucky. I brought you out here. I'm giving you everything that you want. I'm giving you the wedding. I'm giving you Vanderpump Rules. I mean, oh God, there's so much information that wants to come through around this. It's kind of like, and so I do think that on some fundamental level, he feels that Brittany owes him. And I think that it also pisses him off so much. Jax has gotten himself into this horrible bind from an ego perspective because he needs Brittany in order to fuel this narrative of Jax got it right. But then because of this narrative, he has to defer to her. You know, and he's watching her as she, like, you know, she's, I think in some ways eclipsed him in popularity. You know, she's got like 1 million Instagram followers now. Everyone loves Brittany. I mean, that's kind of changing this season because her truer colors are coming out. But historically, everyone's loved Brittany. And so Jax almost becomes a slave to his own narrative because there's still that subtext of like, Jack, you're the fuck up. You got to prove yourself. You got to do right by Brittany. And I do think underneath all that, he's sort of sitting there saying like, hey, I'm the reason you're ever in this situation in the first place. Why do I got to kiss your ass? But he knows on some level he can't really let that slip. I actually think that there's a part of Jax that's saying, look at me, because I do believe for right now he's been faithful. I think, though, that there's a part of him that's even like, kind of like, you owe me for being faithful. I'm not even cheating on you. Like, you're lucky you get this from me.
Right.
You know, so I do. I think that I think that he's in a bind where it's like, you totally owe me, and yet I'm not really allowed to say any of this because I have to kind of pretend that I'm turning over a new leaf. I've got it right. And, you know, you're kind of the queen that I'm bowing down to.
Do you think that Jax will ultimately return to Jax? in the end?
Yes. Yeah. Because I think what's going to happen, like I said, I think he's been on the adrenaline high of all these life transitions. So like dad's death, Brittany, marriage. My feeling is as soon as they're married, they return to life as normal. He doesn't have the high anymore of like all these
But
life transitions.
yeah, but Jamie, won't the high come when Brittany's going to get pregnant? That's the next high. Then Brittany's going to have their first child. That's the next high. He can keep having that until he has 3 kids.
That is true. That is true. And that's an interesting point. And maybe it will take that long. But I would also say that pregnancy and childbirth, it's a different kind of transition. And I mean, I don't have children, so obviously I'm not speaking from personal experience, but I do feel like that's sort of where the rubber hits the road. And yes, it's a big transition and it's miraculous, but it's also where, stuff starts getting real in terms of family. It's not just them anymore. They're going to be up nights, and obviously their sex life is going to change, and he's going to have commitments outside of himself. And, for me, my best guess is there's going to be a kind of, I don't know. I mean, Jax does say he wants children and he's a family man, but I think in the place so I think there probably will be a part of him that actually does enjoy being a father. Probably he's going to be really self-righteous about having kids. That's what I'm feeling in this moment. And he'll be one of those people of like, you don't mess with my kids and you don't mess with me as a dad. Like it'll kind of be that sort of thing. But I also think he's going to feel more imprisoned than ever before. Because where is all this rage and entitlement going to go? And I wouldn't be surprised if it really turns against Brittany.
Well, it seems like for now, the rage and entitlement has turned against Tom Sandoval.
Mm-hmm,
so
sure.
Can we look at their friendship and maybe we can talk about the evolution that their friendship took? I mean, Jax is the guy who slept with his best friend's girlfriend, Kristen.
Yeah.
They somehow managed to patch up the friendship through that. And now Jax is on a social media tirade and a television tirade going on all these different Bravo outlets saying how Tom and Ariana are glorified roommates and that she's gay and doesn't understand her sexuality. Like, I would love if you could dip into their dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, if I drop into Jax and Tom, like Jax to Tom Sandoval, yeah, it's always like you betrayed me. Like that's really what I feel off him. Like you fucking betrayed me. What I'm hearing in this moment is like you broke the agreement. So there's a really long history here, and so when I feel into the energy of you broke the agreement,
but what was the agreement?
Like I feel like there's this sense that these two, I think in a lot of ways have had each other's back for a long time. And I think Tom Sandoval has seen Jax's bad behavior for a long time, has been silent about it for a long time, has let it happen for a long time. I mean, I don't know if he would ever consciously say this of like, why now? Like, you know what I mean? We've kind of been partners in crime for so long. Like, why now? We had each other's back. We kept each other's secrets. And I do think it's interesting. I mean, I think the thing about Tom, I come from a background of loving Tom. He was always my favorite. And so it's interesting now to actually see a lot of other people starting to love Tom, because for a long time when I would say that I love Tom Sandoval, people would like argue with me. So I want to say for the record, I do love Tom. I think he's got this great heart. Having said that, let's be realistic. Like he does have this sort of secretive, naughty side to him. Like I, for one, absolutely believe, I don't know what his situation is now, but like, the whole thing with Miami Girl, It does seem like, he's done some cheating in the past. We've heard that from Schwartz. We've heard that from Jax. So anyways, the only reason why I bring this up is I do get this sense when I drop into like Jax and Tom and their possible agreement that there is this sort of naughty side to Tom, and that it's almost like with Jax kind of maybe allowed him to have a vehicle and an expression for that part of him, because Jax is so far in the other direction that it's almost like Jax creates a certain kind of permission for Tom to be as much of a secret asshole as he might want to be, and that there's kind of been like an understanding between them. It kind of reminds me a little bit now of like in Atlanta, people talk about like, why is Cynthia friends with Kenya? Why is Cynthia friends with Nene? And I've seen people kind of speculate like, oh, she's a weak personality, she's submissive. But when I've kind of dropped into Cynthia and felt into Cynthia, what I hear her saying in regards to Nene or a Kenya is kind of like, you do the heavy lifting. Like meaning, and I've always felt this about Cynthia, that I think that there's kind of like an underground diva in her that she's learned to really not let out, and she kind of covers it with sort of a nice space. But then she's drawn to these personalities who they get to do the heavy lifting of being the badass bitch, of, you know what I mean, being the one who's the diva, and that Cynthia can kind of be behind the scenes getting a charge off of it, but she never really has to get her hands all the way dirty. And it's kind of like a similar thing I think maybe has been going on with Tom and Jax, where Tom does have this big heart, and he cares about, he's not like people say Jax is like a sociopath.
Uh-huh.
I don't like labeling people like that, but Jax is like really on the extreme end of things. And I do wonder if Tom has gotten a certain kind of charge and permission out of being friends with a guy like Jax, but now he's starting to break the agreement. Does that make more sense?
Yeah. Why do you think Jax is so threatened by Tom and Ariana's relationship?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've never thought of him being particular. I mean, my experience of this was just that Jax was going after something that he felt was really important to Tom and kind of exploiting something that has a grain of truth to it, which is, Tom and Ariana do feel like they're at this impasse where it's like they want different things from their lives and from their relationship. I mean, we don't know what conversations they're having behind closed doors, but as far as what we're seeing on the show, there is the kind of split between them. And so it just has felt to me like Jax is just going after that, as a kind of a weapon and a way to hurt them. I mean, I could drop into the idea of him being threatened by it. If you want, I could drop in and just see if I hear anything specifically in relationship to their. All right.
Yeah,
so
I love that. Yeah.
So, okay, this is Jax to Tom and Ariana. I just immediately feel this rage, and what I'm hearing is like, get off your high horse. Like, who are you to judge me? And we hear Jax say that a lot. Like, who are you to judge me? Like, you're not so perfect. I think in the place, again, I think it's two things. I think in the place where Jax feels like an agreement is getting broken, and also the place where Jax is getting called out on stuff that's legitimate. I think that Jax really just defaults to this thing of like, who are you to point out my flaws? Like, who are you to say this to me? Get off your high horse. And for me, my experience of it is just this, there's this entitlement in Jax that feels like he should be able to get away with whatever he wants to get away with. My guess is because somewhere early in his life, things were done to him that were never taken responsibility for. And so there's this voice inside him now that says, well, if they can get away with it, I should be able to do whatever I want to do. So there's kind of this misdirected rage. And so when people like Tom or Ariana or whomever come in and challenge him, I think there's just this misplaced rage that comes in and says, who the F are you to tell me that I shouldn't, that I should do X, Y, or Z? Look at you. Look at what's going on in your life. And then he just kind of goes for it. I mean, that's kind of my vibe off him.
What do you feel when it comes to Tom and Ariana? Like, it's clear that if Tom were with a woman who wanted the traditional things in life, wanted, kids and to get married and the ring and the whole thing, that he would more than rise to the occasion. But he's with Ariana, who doesn't need those things to feel complete. What do you think he is subconsciously not saying to Ariana?
Well, to Ariana?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I've always felt Tom kind of has a fuck you to the whole world. Like, I feel like what he says to the whole world is, you're not getting all of this. So I think that he's got an unconscious commitment to staying really small. That's why it's like, I always look at like the energy of every detail. He's 5% owner of TomTom. So it's like he's living his dream in a way. He's the bar owner. He only owns 5%, and he has to like kiss the ring of Lisa. So there's this way that his energy always feels trapped. To me, his energy in relationship to Ariana feels trapped. It's like, I actually think that Tom, he has this huge heart. He wants to be a family man. I feel like he's got this robust sexuality. So one of the things I do is sometimes I feel into like people's higher selves. And I actually do that in sessions now. At the end of each session, like I'll channel your higher self. With Tom, I feel like part of his higher self is like, I think he's actually like a sexual healer. I think he's so supportive of people's sexuality and sexual energy, and he celebrates it. Even his video with like Charles McMansion, is that what it was called?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Video was about like literally liberating people's libidos, So it's just interesting to me that he's in a relationship with Ariana where it's like the heart sex energy can't run. It was the same thing with Kristen, if you remember, like she wasn't sexually active with him, at least towards the end. So for Tom, it's like I do feel this real unconscious commitment to kind of like, I'm just going to keep my world really small. I'm going to keep it really controlled. You're going to get 5% of me, just like I, own 5% of this bar. Let me drop in though and kind of go specifically to like if I bring in Ariana from Tom's perspective. So, okay. Because we've been talking about a bunch of stuff, I just kind of want to clear myself out for a second. Okay, so this is Tom Sandoval to Ariana. I mean, I do feel that there's a lot of unconscious anger and frustration, and I do hear a fuck you. And I want to be clear, I don't think that's everything. I think he loves her really deeply, but I think in this place where there's stifled energy, that's where there's a fuck you. And, I have to imagine that Tom, like when I talk about all this and I kind of feel into it, my suspicion is that there's a place in Tom's history where his energy was kind of turned against him somehow or used against him somehow. And so then his reaction to that is like, okay, you're not getting all of this. And I've got all this amazing creative energy, but I'm going to put it into creating like a costume for this like cheesy birthday party, or I'm going to get fame and fortune, but it's within this context of like a reality show where I have to be a minion to Lisa Vanderpump, and like I can only go so far. Like Tom's whole energetic pattern to me is just this guy with all this amazing energy that's just stifled. And I do think there's a fuck you to the world behind that. Kind of like I said, you're not getting all of this. And I do think, yeah, like in his relationship now to Ariana, there's this part of him that's kind of like, fuck you for shutting me down, even though he's really the one ultimately who's shutting himself down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What is your read on Stassi and Beau?
Okay, yeah.
Because Beau had a real job. Or I don't know if he still does it, but he, at least last year, he's had a long career in commercial casting, and now he's on tour with Stassi.
I know. I don't fully trust Beau. So I think it's weird. This is where things get weird because I actually like on a sort of like casual TV viewer level, I don't personally love Stassi, but what's interesting is when I felt into a lot of this stuff, I actually think in terms of a lot of her relationships right now, she's coming from a good place. And so like when I drop into Stassi to Beau, I really feel like she's open, she's saying yes. I feel like the image I get literally, I see kind of visual images that are kind of metaphors. I see her legs open, meaning like I'm ready to surrender to you, and like I want to surrender to a man in relationship. For the sake of clarity, so people don't get pissed, when I say I want to surrender to a man, that doesn't mean like Stepford wife. It means like energetically, emotionally, like we're all surrendering to each other. But with Beau, it feels more complicated. Let me just say this. I'll get in specifically to Stassi in a moment, but my overall sense of Beau is that he's someone who I feel kind of like an undercover arrogance there. I feel like an undercover superiority. Like I feel like this is a guy who kind of is saying, yeah, like that there's just some judgment there, but he covers it with this sort of like nice guy. Mm-hmm. Aw shucks demeanor.
To your point, I was listening to an episode they did of her podcast, because he now also basically co-hosts her podcast on occasion. And, they just bought this house and they have to renovate a ton of it. So they were basically like, we're homeowners. they're not. She's a homeowner, so they definitely got into like him kind of losing his masculinity in that sense, because she's going to be the provider. She is the one who bought the home. So it was interesting listening to him say, like, I'm paying rent, almost defending himself to the listener and to her fans. And then as they went into all the renovations that they have to do in the house, so much anger came up for him. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So this totally ties into kind of what I've been feeling off him towards her, which is just kind of like a real inner conflict. He actually, like, I've been saying this a bit recently, he feels kind of like a much, much lower key Jason Hoppy to her Bethany, where it's kind of like this, like this nice guy who's like sort of wants to hop on her success train. Because here's the thing, my sense of Beau is just that, like, that there's kind of this stronger current of energy in him that's gotten shut down. Like, for whatever reason, he feels like he has to hide it. So he puts on this nice guy mask, the nice guy mask, cooks and makes Beau puns in the kitchen and puts on dinosaur suits and pretends like everything.
You know that he was an actor, or he was trying to be an actor. And then I guess he fell into commercial casting.
Right. So if we kind of look at like the energetic blueprint of everything, like what I hear from that is, okay, so there's like creative energy that's not fully flowing. Right. And so I do feel like there is this kind of more intense energy in him that he disowns. And so, so when someone like Stassi comes along, it's like, let me hitch my caboose to your train, because there are things here I want for myself, like visibility and success, but I'm also going to resent you because I'm hitching my caboose to your train. And my success is now contingent on your success. And yeah, there is something emasculating about this, and I'm still having to hide who I am. It almost compounds the original energetic pattern. So if Beau is someone who's got like anger and intensity inside of himself, that he feels like, I'm not allowed to show this. I'm not allowed to show this. So let me pretend to be a nice guy. But then in that place, he's cutting himself off from his energy. He's cutting himself off from his life force. And then he's not like being as successful as he wants to be out there in the world. This is just like a more concentrated version of that, where it's like, okay, so now I'm going to hitch my caboose to Stassi, kind of ride on her success. I kind of have to pretend to be this totally supportive, like nice boyfriend. By the way, my whole reputation on this show is now built on being the nice, perfect, supportive boyfriend. But deep down, I'm getting even angrier and angrier because there's something cut off in me. And this isn't really my success. And then because I'm getting angrier and angrier, I'm going to like want to disown that more and more, because I'm still in the belief that this somehow makes me a bad person. This is the thing I have to hide. So the gap between like what he's hiding and then what's on the surface is getting wider and wider and wider. And I do think it's an apt comparison. I mean, I think we saw something really similar with Jason Hoppy, where it was like you could see he had to be the good boy for his parents. You know what I mean? And he had to be like the nice guy. And then it's like something sort of stifled inside of himself. And then he gets into this sort of similar energetic pattern with Bethany. And then when that blows up, it just becomes the vehicle for all the rage he's never allowed himself to feel. It just comes out and it just gets directed at Bethany. I don't think Beau is as split and intense as Jason Hoppy, but I am really curious to see what happens with them, because I don't think it's going to stay. I think they're still in the honeymoon phase.
You think they're still in the honeymoon phase?
Yeah, and I think, it makes sense because we've seen Stassi we've seen her make questionable decisions. And so I do feel like Beau is a next step, in the sense that he does treat her with more. I feel like before she had these kind of alpha males like Jax and Patrick and, Frank or whomever, and they were just like assholes to her. And now she's got a guy who's sort of softer and more sensitive, but it feels like his inner conflict is driven underground. And I think the real challenge for Stassi, I think with Stassi, it's like, if I kind of feel into this, I think that she's still waiting for a guy to kind of come through and like rescue her on some level. And that if she were with like that Beau is sort of now the perfect guy who's going to make everything okay. And I think if I think about Stassi being with a guy who maybe is like in his own success, like a robust masculine guy who can match her energy, but is successful in his own right, And she's successful in her own right. And there's kind of a healthy individuation there, but then they come together. What I feel then is, yeah, like Stassi's got to kind of give something up. There's like a fantasy she has to give up. She has to kind of, I think before she was like sort of looking for love in all the wrong places with these like handsome, like successful guys who were somehow going to rescue her. And now there's kind of a way that Beau is sort of like, you know what I mean, rescuing her from her story. And I think there's something there she has to give up. And I think if she gives it up, she's going to have to feel some grief. You know, this feels like an earlier heartbreak for her. And I think this is the little girl in her who's still kind of clinging to like, where's my knight in shining armor?
But they're getting married.
Well, a lot of people get married. Jax and Brittany are getting married.
Right.
And by the way, maybe they are a good match. Kind of like how I feel Jax and Brittany could be a good match if they're willing to do their separate work. So if Beau, so this is a great, let's explore this because I think this will be interesting. If Beau is willing to go do his own work, own whatever this anger is inside of him, own the place inside that he's been disowning, the intensity that he feels he's had to hide. And if Stassi is willing to go out to her corner and sort of give up sort of this little girl desire to be rescued, to step into her own womanhood, then the two of them can kind of come back together as these fully formed individuals, and they really might be a good match for each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
This is what happens a lot in relationships. We get drawn to the people who actually, if we're willing to like get into the conflict and to see what it's revealing about ourselves. So if Beau were willing to stay in relationship with Stassi and own the place inside of him that says, I fucking hate you for calling the shots. And by the way, this is my anger. That's mine to take responsibility for. So let me see where this takes me into my history. There's something I'm angry about that I never got to like be angry about. Holy shit, I've got anger. I'm allowed to have this. This is my energy. Suddenly I forgive myself for my anger. And then it's like, I've got all access to all this energy and all this life force I never had before. And hey, I'm actually like a strong man. I thought I had to shut all this down. Look at me, I'm a guy and I can go out and do my own things. Oh, hey, Stassi, I'm not so angry at you anymore because I'm present to my own energy. Do you understand?
100, yeah, 100%. I'm totally with you. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because, you know, it's sophisticated stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to reduce it to like the simplest terms. But yeah, you know, then they might be good for each other. But what happens is, and you know, we were talking about Love is Blind. You're even seeing this on Love is Blind. What happens is people are so scared to get into their actual emotional truth because they're so scared. Well, one, they think it makes them wrong or bad and they have shame. But two, they think that means that's going to be the end of the relationship. And so in their desire to cling onto the relationship at all costs and to protect themselves, they continue to hide these parts of themselves. But then they end up, you know, that's when they end up splitting up anyway because the marriage implodes. You know, so actually, I think they might have a better shot at things if, you know, if they can get really emotionally honest about what's going on underneath the surface.
Can we talk about the Witches of WeHo and how it seems like Stassi and Katie have made a pact that that they just cannot tolerate Kristen anymore. Like Stassi was saying in a recent episode how she was formerly she was able to forgive Jax, or she was able to forgive Kristen for sleeping with Jax way back when because it was something she did, but now she's at the point where she can't forgive Kristen because it's who she is.
Yeah, well, for me personally, I do feel that Katie and Stassi are coming at this from a different place, but they are united. That's true. I guess I would start with, I think this is a very multifaceted triangle. I don't think there's
let's get into it.
I mean, I think like when I drop into Kristen, like I'll just even do this right now. So if I drop into Kristen kind of looking at, you know, Stassi and Katie, yeah, it's just like what I'm hearing is like, meet me here, meet me here, meet me here, like stay here with me. And then it's like, actually, if I keep following that thread, what I'm hearing is show me how much you love me. So like, I feel like with Kristen, I do feel like there's this demand from her that's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to go in circles. And I need and want you to meet me here to prove to me how much you guys actually love me. So I think it feels very young. It feels like she's putting a ton of need on them that really doesn't belong on them, and that she's really kind of issuing a demand that's like, I want to stay stuck in all my shit and I need you to be here with me, and if you're not, that means you don't actually love me. So I want to say for Katie and Stassi, that is a big energetic load, and I don't think that's a fair load to, you know, anyone to have on them. That said, when I feel into Stassi to Kristen, what I feel from her is kind of like I want to like meet you where you're at. I want you to meet me where I'm at. Like, I want to be in relationship with you. You're making this impossible. It's kind of what I'm hearing. It's kind of like Kristen is basically demanding, like, you have to give me so much time, space, and attention. Like, you have to treat me with all the kid gloves in the world. And kind of what I hear Stassi saying is like, I want to be here for you, Kristen, but like, I kind of don't have time for this right now because her life is changing, you know, and I think that's the reality. She's doing pretty well right now. And so for her, it feels more compassionate. It feels a little bit more generous. Whereas with Katie to Kristen, with that, that's where I feel the contempt. That's where I'm like, get the fuck over this. Like you're a mess and it's disgusting to me. And that to me feels more like, you're externalizing something I will never let myself be. Yeah, I think Katie's someone who drags herself up by the bootstraps. She goes. And I think that Kristen is embodying a level of vulnerability and messiness that Katie, she does not want any part of that for herself. And seeing it in Kristen, it's just like bringing up a level of like deep contempt. And it's just kind of like, I want nothing to do with this. And then I think, yeah, so for Stassi and Katie, and then so if we go to Stassi to Katie, you know, with that, I just sort of feel like you're a lifeline for me. It's like, you're an old friend. Things are changing for me. Like, you feel familiar. You feel safe. Like, I'm really like, you feel good to me in my changing life, whereas I don't think Kristen does. And if I drop into Katie to Stassi, it's kind of like, your shine feels good on me. Like, it's kind of like, let me bask in your spotlight, because I'm kind of not. Because the thing is, Kristen and Katie actually have more in common with each other than either of them do with Stassi right now, in the sense that they're both kind of like sort of stuck in these sort of cesspool relationships. I mean, I know Katie wouldn't ever see herself that way, but Katie's not really doing a lot with herself. And so I think that for Katie, it feels good to be in Stassi's spotlight and to kind of feel some of that shine for herself. So that's kind of like my kind of lay of the land with them.
Do you think that, because there's a chance that Kristen may pull out ahead of everybody in this show and have huge success with this book. She wants to option this for a TV show. Like, she may come out the winner out of this entire cast if she hits the lottery with this book.
Yeah, so what you're saying feels true. Is there like buzz about the book that it's like actually...
So it was co-written with the author of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And that woman obviously has a ton of connections. Obviously, she wrote the book that got turned into a hugely successful movie. And when she met Kristen, or rather when Kristen met this author, they were like, let's team up with this idea you have and let's try and pitch this as a series. So that's cool. That's what they're doing. So there's a chance that if this book is a huge success and she gets a series made out of it, I can 100% see Stassi turning around and being like, oh, you're at my level.
So you think there is a kind of superiority from Stassi to Kristen?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
But I also may not be giving Stassi and Katie enough credit.
I mean, like I said, I've kind of been surprised when I drop into Stassi around this stuff, because like I'm not her biggest fan as a viewer, and that's why. And I've like double checked and triple checked. But like I said, every time I drop in, she does seem to feel warm towards Kristen. But it's kind of like this thing, like I can't do this right now with you. Mm-hmm. And I will say, like, that feels reflected on the show. Like when I see her deal with Kristen on the show so far. I mean, and you can tell me if you see it differently. I'd love to know if you've seen evidence contrary. I've not seen Stassi deal with Kristen in a way that's felt cruel to me so far.
No,
like, I feel,
no. Yeah, no, I feel like she's dealt with her from a very empathetic place.
Because I think Stassi feels good right now. Like, I think she's feeling good in her life, you know? But I think there's just that flavor of like like I said, like, I don't have time for this. Like, I want you here, but I don't. And so maybe there's kind of a sense of betrayal, kind of like what I was talking about with Jax and Tom. And maybe this is just where we're at in the universe of Vanderpump Rules right now, where it's like these guys have been so codependent. And I think there's been such like a fierce loyalty of like, we have each other's back till the end of time. And I think what we're seeing now is them kind of coming up against the limitations of that, of like, actually, I gotta go.
I want to pivot a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Beverly Hills, which is coming up. I know you said that you have some pretty strong feelings about Denise Richards. So let's talk about that. And then I want to get into some Love is Blind stuff because you and I have both watched it. So Denise.
Well, I wouldn't say they're not strong feelings, but I do have a hit on Denise. Denise is one of those people, actually, Margaret from Jersey has been the same way, although people are starting to kind of turn on her. There's certain people, and Brittany was one of them too, actually. There's certain people
did you not trust Margaret Josephs?
I have never trusted Margaret Josephs, no.
Tell me why. This is interesting to me. Tell me why.
Oh God, it's like she's been on for 4 seasons now. I first of all, just intuitively. So there's certain people, like when I watch them, I'm just like, I don't believe what you're telling me right now. And so Brittany was one, Margaret was another, where I was just like, you're presenting this certain face and everything in me doesn't trust you. I felt like, I've been saying it since season 1. I'm like, her whole life feels kind of transient to me. And I was like, I feel like she's the type of person it's going to come out that like she owes a bunch of taxes or like she's in financial trouble, so now of course, there's the whole lawsuit thing. I think I was skeptical of her. I just feel like people reveal themselves in everything they do. And so what I remember from the beginning with her, and I feel like throughout, I've just seen this pattern of denial with her where it's just like, even if it's with her ex-husband and her son, I don't know if it was her stepson, but do you remember that like truce she tried to broker between them?
Yeah. She has a biological son and she has a few stepchildren.
Yeah, I remember that stepchild, like she was sitting there and, I'm always aware of like, okay, she's trotting this out as a storyline for the show. That's okay. That's fine. But she's sitting there with him at this photo shoot being like, I want you and your father to make up. And I remember her stepson looking at her with like just rage in his eyes, like when the father was brought up. And I was just, and like Margaret sitting there with a smile on her face being like, you guys are going to work it out. And I'm just sitting there like, Margaret, you're not in reality right now. Like this, I don't know what's gone on between them. This guy right now hates his father. And they're not just going to like kiss and make up. And they're certainly like not going to, like, this isn't going to be some like bullshit storyline for the show that like to me, I was just like, Margaret, you are in denial. And so again, for me, it's like, I just look at that. I'm like, if you're in denial about this, what else are you in denial about in your life? And I think as the show went on, it was just like her putting out the rumor that Jennifer's husband cheated on her. And, but then she's like, oh, I'm sorry. Well, I apologize. It's like, okay. Her throwing wine at Danielle, her throwing Marty into the pool. It's just like how many times, but then getting on her high horse about other people. And that's kind of why I love Jennifer because, Jennifer's ridiculous and she's off her rocker half the time. But I'm like, she's the only one who's calling out Margaret's hypocrisy. It's like, why does Margaret get this? She could have hurt Marty when she pushed him into a pool. Mm-hmm. Just, you know what I mean? I mean, it's not as intense. Totally. What Danielle did to her was insane and it was violent and Margaret had a right to be upset about that. But the way she plays victim with all of this, where it's like, no, you are going out there. Oh, I know I'm going on and on, but you asked.
No, please.
The thing about Margaret that has driven me crazy is also the way that she will now victimize Marty, like inserting herself in Marty Danielle's divorce, which she has no business being in. And then being like, oh, Marty, you were conned by this woman. Like she got between you and your children. And I'm just sitting there like, Margaret, you are pretending to be this wise kind of like down to earth person who's like cool. And yet you're trying to propagate this like fiction that Danielle got between Marty and his children. Let me tell you who got between Marty and his children. Marty got between Marty and his children. Danielle can't make him do anything. If Marty chose Danielle over his children, that's on Marty. So when I see stuff like that with Margaret, I'm just like, you are not the thing that you pretend to be. And I'd be okay with it if you would actually just own your inner Jennifer and just be kind of a messy woman who, like, yeah, gets ridiculous and says absurd things and gets physical. But I think for me, it's the place where she sort of pretends to be this down-to-earth voice of reason, which for some reason people are buying into. That's where I get triggered. And I'm just like, Margaret, I've got nothing for you.
Okay.
I'm saying this with love. I also love Margaret. I love her. No, I mean, and she does have some, she has a big heart. The thing she did with the charity was wonderful. She loves her husband. Like, I'm not trying to make her out to be a villain, but as a viewer, she frustrates me.
Okay, Denise. So this is fascinating because, I mean, this is still going to play out on the show, but the facts that we know are that Denise, there's a huge divide between the entire cast and Denise, so much so that she basically ruined, or the energy was so negative at the BravoCon Beverly Hills panel, which I was at, by the way, and can give you a firsthand account that it was totally fucked up. And I've talked about it on here many times. And right after BravoCon, they left from New York straight to Rome. And Denise was trying everything in her power to get out of this Rome trip. Tell me everything you feel about her.
So I initially really liked her like everyone else did, mostly because, I thought her relationship with her daughter, both her daughters, but, particularly the one that she adopted, I thought that was incredibly sweet. And she did seem, she seemed like a breath of fresh air, down to earth. So I was really enjoying her. As the season wore on, and this is what always happens, there were definitely things coming up, little signs coming up for me that felt like warning signs. So I think the first thing that I really noticed was she kept like divulging these like private details of her sex life with Aaron. And then you'd get these scenes where she's telling him about it, and you could see like he was not comfortable with what was happening. Like, he was not comfortable. And I noticed the way that she would kind of navigate it. She just kind of would laugh it off, play it off like a joke. And I'm like, your husband is clearly not okay with this. Like, he's clearly uncomfortable with you talking about his penis, all this stuff. And you think that his discomfort is funny and you're ignoring it. And that, to me, it just didn't sit well with me. I don't generally like to do this kind of thing, but in this case, I think it's an interesting thing to do where, like, if you try to imagine that with the genders reversed, like, if you try to imagine, like, Jim Bellino talking about, like, him and Alexis's sex life and her kind of nervously laughing and him just ignoring her discomfort, people would have the pitchforks out. You know what I mean? Denise is doing it, and for some reason, it's just kind of all getting played off like it's this big laugh. But to me, it was sort of very uncomfortable. And I think as the season progressed, I think seeing the way that Denise especially handled Camille at the reunion, that was a big kind of red flag to me. Again, Camille was off her rocker. Like, there's no debating that. Like, I'm not sticking up for Camille, but for me, it's like when I look at someone like Camille who's just like having some sort of meltdown, if you're the normal, sane one, I just feel like the kind, compassionate, sane thing to do is to kind of recognize, okay, like, this person opposite me is not okay. Let me just kind of back off and let them sort of do whatever they need to do. And Denise, instead, I mean, I don't remember the specifics so much now, but I just remember her continuing to go in on Camille. And at that point, I was just like, Denise, like, what are you trying to accomplish here? Like, she's clearly a lunatic. So if you're going to kind of continue to go in and push these buttons, sort of what does that make you? And so when I was sort of connecting that with this place inside where she was sort of laughing off her husband's discomfort, the word that came to me was like provocateur. Like, I feel like she's a very kind of passive-aggressive provocateur. And then it's like you start putting together all the dots where it's like, oh, I suddenly remember she was married to Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah.
It's like she was married to an insane man. And so then where I go, I'm kind of talking you through my process. Then where I go with that is like, oh, you get mileage out of being the sane, down-to-earth person to like the other crazy person. And there's kind of this passive aggressive way that you'll sort of push these buttons And you get to be, the quiet provocateur, who's the sane one, who's the nice one, who's the down-to-earth one. All these other people around you are crazy. And, that was kind of my hit off her, like that there's something that she's doing underneath the surface that feels very provocative. And we saw her even kind of do it with like Kim Richards. Like, again, not taking Kim Richards' side, and I actually loved that Lisa Rinna gave her the middle finger as Archegene, but the way that Denise inserted herself into that situation at that Halloween party and kind of like started telling Kim what for when it was none of her business. And there was a way that she just wasn't hearing Kim. And I'm just looking at Kim Richards. I'm like, this is a recovering alcoholic for sure, maybe has some sort of like psychological issues, you know what I mean? And it's sort of like, what are you going in there for right now, Denise? You know? So I've just never fully for a long time, I've not trusted her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what do you make of the early like rumors that we're hearing just about Denise and Brandy? Or maybe it would be more interesting I'll have you back like in the middle of all of that shitstorm, and then we'll know exactly what we're looking at.
Yeah, because I do like to see stuff play out because I like to get the information, and that's actually how I work. Even like I'm always, you've experienced it. I ask people questions because the more information I get, that's when I start to get really refined, intuitive. So I will say, if you want a little kind of behind the scenes gossip, I have heard through someone who's very, very, very close to production on Beverly Hills that basically it is all true. Like, one, that this is the drama that's going to play out, or at least part of it, the Brandy, Denise, did they or did they not have an affair, and that it's true that they did have an affair.
Of course it's true. Of course. I love that curveball of like, I absolutely hate Margaret Josephs, though. That was amusing.
No, I don't want to say I hate her. She triggers me. I don't believe what she's saying, and she triggers me. And I'll say one other thing about her. Well, you wanted to end on a positive note.
No. Give me the one other thing. I want to hear it.
I just, on a body level, because I get I'm clairsentient, so that means I get most of my intuitive psychic information through my body. I get literal gut feelings. When that assistant or that housekeeper of hers, Marlene, is on the show, I literally, I can't, it's like so dark. I just feel like they tell a story of like Marlene, the happy housekeeper, who's like all smiles and fun and games. And when she's on the screen, my feeling is just like, this woman has lived a life and she has seen some things, and I just have been through things. And it's like, it's hard for me to watch because it's like, I just feel like there's this huge discrepancy between like the story of Marlene, the happy housekeeper, and just what's really going on with her on a much deeper level. And again, I just sort of look at the energetic pattern of everything. So for me, that's been another clue with Margaret of like, just this relationship to denial. It just feels like she's in a universe where there's a lot of emotional denial about dark stuff that's going on.
What do you get from Marge Sr.?
Well, it's funny because I spoke about this on a video before this whole storyline came about, about Margaret and Marge Sr., just to toot my own horn a little. But, in the video, what I was saying was like, what I noticed was Margaret was so hell-bent on vilifying Danielle. And I just felt like sort of what she was saying. And that's why she was so upset with Teresa, because basically what she was saying is like, you've got to see what Danielle did to me. Like, no, this is what it was. You've got to see my good intentions. Like, and that's the thing. So this is the thing. And if Margaret ever hears this is what I want to say to her. I feel like Margaret got so upset with Danielle because Danielle did not see her good intentions, that Margaret really tried to be there. And this is true. She really tried to be there for her in her wedding, to be a good friend, to be a good bride organizer or whatever it was she was. And Danielle did not see her good intentions, and she made her a bad guy. And then when Teresa took Danielle's side, it was kind of even more like someone not seeing Margaret's good intentions. And I noticed that Margaret was so hell-bent on making sure Danielle is blamed, Danielle is vilified. And for me, I was like, okay, so what is this triggering in Margaret? I feel like this is the place in Margaret that hasn't felt seen in her good intentions, and that this is really about her relationship to her mother. but that she can't get mad at her mother. So instead, we're seeing her get mad at these other people. And that's why I thought it was so interesting, because on The Real Housewives of New Jersey, there was an interview recently where she literally said something like, I can't get mad at my mother, or I feel guilty to get mad at my mother. And so I think we're seeing her deal with her mother on the show. I do think there's a level of real anger and resentment that Margaret has not let herself feel yet. I think there's something in Margaret that's like, I want so badly to be seen. Why can't you see me? You know, it's like, Mom, like, why can't you see me? Why can't you be there for me as a mother? Like, why do I have to like kind of like be the adult in this relationship? There's a place in Margaret that just feels so unseen and so missed. And I do think that's why she gets so mad when she feels like other people aren't seeing her, you know, her good intentions, you know? So I don't know if that answers your question.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I have my own kind of take on Marge Sr., but I don't want to like offend the entire internet. But we can talk about it offline. Where can people?
Am I gonna offend the internet? Have I?
No. You haven't said it. Like, would I? If I said it, I would offend people. But where can people find you online and watch your videos and even like book a reading with you?
Okay, yeah. Well, definitely follow me on Instagram, and I love to tell people that I do. Every like few weeks, I open up my stories for like, if you want like a free quick hit, if you have a question for me, you can ask me a question, and then I post the questions on my stories every day. And yeah, I create content about the Housewives and all that. So my Instagram handle is Jamie Stein. That's JamiesTein. And then yeah, check out my website. It's hollywoodreadings.com. And you can read more about what I do, and you can write me there. You can also DM me on Instagram. And if you're hearing this and you're feeling an impulse, I urge you to honor it, because people usually know when this is right for them.
I love you. I think you're so talented, and I'm excited to chat a little bit more with you when we get off. You guys can follow Out in the Wild podcast. I follow Jess X NYC, and I will talk to you guys soon.